And welcome, one and all, and happy homecoming. Welcome to another episode of Night Shift. I am Bryson Turner, a very happy UCF student on this homecoming weekend, and with me is Eric Lopez. I'll tell you what, it wasn't perfect, but the UCF Knights managed to outlast the Cincinnati Bearcats 25-21 with some late game heroics from Mikey Keene, who once again steps up and ends up leading the Knights to a game-winning drive. How you feeling, Eric?
It's just a bizarre game. I mean, you got the backup quarterback, Mikey King, who's now a folk hero by the fan base after winning against Florida last year in the bowl game, now beats Cincinnati, the first top 25 win since 2018. And then the guy that scores the game-winning touchdowns, RJ Harvey, who didn't take a snap last year. And I think if you did a poll of the Night Nation right now, I think they would tell you that both Mikey Keene and RJ Harvey should start the rest of the year. And quite frankly, I can't disagree with him tonight, obviously. They don't win this game without Mikey King. I mean, let's call it for what it is, Bryson. The passing game was far superior with Mikey King. They spread the ball out. Yes, the line, I thought the line did a great job. They ran the ball, really won the line batter as far as the running game. I think you have the stats up there right now. UCF dominated the running game. I thought their D-line did a good job containing Cincinnati's running game. But yet, I'm sorry, I don't believe they win this game with John Rice Plumlee if he stays in the game. I thought Mikey King brought a spark and brought a passing game. And this guy's career, I don't know what's going to happen to him, Bryson, but he's always going to be a fan favorite. He's a fan favorite no matter what he does the rest of the way. And and you've seen the clip on social media where the players celebrated him in the locker room, throwing him around. How are you not going to keep playing this kid? And basically, we've got a quarterback controversy in our hands, Bryson, moving forward.
Well, I'll tell you this. I do think that JRP should not be rushed back. When you look back at that play, when that was a very hard hit, I'll tell you what, I vividly remember after the South Carolina State game asking Plumlee about, being a little more self-preserving when he's on the run. And right. This is the exact kind of thing that I was fearing that would happen and ended up happening. And
he's a reckless runner.
Credit to the referee. Did you notice how Plumlee popped right back up to try and get back in the game? Yeah. But the ref grabbed his jersey and was like, no, you're not getting back in there. I mean, good job on the ref for doing that. But it's clear that he was shaken up. And Malzahn said in the post-game press, so we saw a little bit of it before we went live. Coach Malzahn believes that he has a concussion, and you don't want to mess with that.
You think?
I know, right?
Yeah,
you don't want to mess with that. You don't want to mess with that.
I'm just happy. I will give him get credit. Finally, a college coach admits a player's injury. Finally. Thank you. Was that hard? Is that so hard to do? Thank you.
Look, with that sort of thing, you do not want to mess with that. And so you don't want to rush JRP back. That much I believe is certain. As far as the ultimate quarterback controversy, though, I honestly think that Mikey King really made the case for himself tonight. The passing game looked the best that it's ever been this season. And that one run that Mikey Keene made, I think that he made the first down, really showed his ability to work with his legs. The only issue I think is that again, Malzahn really likes these mobile quarterbacks, and so I think that if maybe Malzahn will hold off on starting JRP next week if he doesn't really like his progress on recovery.
Well, I think first of all, I think I'm glad you brought this up because you know this very well from our group chat. I am livid about how the Dolphins got treated in the NFL with the Tua situation. And everybody says it's about their safety. He shouldn't have played the second game because he just got a concussion. JRP should be automatically ruled out next Saturday. If we're really serious about the concussion and the well-being, he has no business dressing next week. Should take next week off. And you have an excuse. Mikey King should start. He's earned the right to start next Saturday. And if it's about winning this season, right? That's what I'm being told. If it's about winning this season, you got to play the guy that gives you the best chance to win. And there's no denying Mikey Keene, the players like him, especially look at how. Did you notice the chemistry, Bryson, that Ryan O'Keefe and Mikey Keene have? Like, was that an accident? Like, I don't think that's an accident.
Well, of course. I mean, they had 10 games of chemistry together. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I will say this. Mikey Keene, I think, looked a lot more comfortable than he did last season. I think that
I agree with that.
And I think the fact that they really propagated the quarterback controversy between Mikey Keene and JRP, and that both of them had an equal chance to start, I think really helped Keene prepare himself for this moment, and he looks so much better than he did last season. Really,
well, now you wonder. You always have to be cautious here in that how much of this was the fact that Cincinnati prepared for Mikey Keene. He's a backup quarterback. Now teams will have tape on him, like Memphis and Tulane coming up. And again, we're going to get into this later. Can this performance travel on the road? Because I know everybody's celebrating this win, and rightfully so, but this win doesn't mean anything if you lose next week at Memphis. Does not mean anything. And we still don't know if this team can play well on the road, but I think fans are going to question why he hasn't been the starter the whole time. Now, I think that's a little unfair, although I will say, I was surprised Mikey Keene didn't start the year, and I do think Mikey Keene maybe makes a difference in the Louisville game. I don't think he makes a difference last week at East Carolina. I think that's just East Carolina had their number. But this is a mess, Bryson. This is a quarterback mess because you've got John Rice Plumlee, who's a two-sport athlete. You have Mikey Keene. Do you believe he's going to transfer after this season? He's got. If he does, he would probably prefer not to play more than 4 games. We don't know what's going to happen with that. And then you got Thomas Castellanos. Who's going to be the starting quarterback next year in the Big 12 is a big open question right now. We don't know the answer to that. And it's just wild. I don't know. I will say this for you, longtime UCF fans. This does keep a tradition going, by the way, Bryson. Do you remember the stat I said before the season preview?
Not off the top of my head.
Since 2010, I believe it's the stat I gave, or in the era of the American, UCF's only had 2 seasons where the starting quarterback opening day played every game and started every game. That was 2013 and 2017. And I think that's going to, once again, we're going to have another season where 2 different quarterbacks start a game. I think Mikey Keene will start next week. I'd be stunned if he doesn't. So it's just, here we are. It's a UCF tradition unlike any other. A quarterback tradition, a quarterback controversy, and multi-guys starting in a season.
I think Gus did mention in his post-game press conference that he wanted to preserve Keene's red shirt. So for all we know, Mikey may have already conveyed to Gus that maybe he wants the transfer.
Well, and there was speculation that they may have come to, and I haven't seen it. We'll get Kyle here. Kyle's at the press conference. We'll ask him that question. So make a note of that, Bryson. We'll ask him that. If that's the case, then obviously I think what might have happened here, I could see a scenario where Gus and Mikey Keene came to an agreement to part ways after this year and try to protect those 4 games because Mikey Keene realized that he doesn't have a future here. Clearly, he's been passed up as the quarterback. But if you're Gus, you had to keep him on the roster. You didn't want to do what happened at USF, where Timmy McClain enters the portal as soon as the starter is named, and now you're left thin. So I could buy that. But it really makes it tricky, though, here, Bryson, now, because it's kind of mixed messages. Do you want to win? Do you not want to win? But now, because now he's played in 1 game. So next week would be 2 if he plays against Memphis. You got Tulane, which is 3. Okay. And then Navy would be the 4th game. Okay. Just double check with me, Bryce. Make sure I'm not mathematically incorrect. And same with you, the audience, which, by the way, we will get to your comments. Check it, bring them in here. We forgot. We're both fired up. We both have a lot of caffeine in our system. Bryson's still recovering from Spirit Splash. He brought a duck with him. He got...
By the way, comment what I should name this duck. Should I name it Mikey or should I name it John Rice? Or maybe RJ? Who knows?
Feel free to throw in your thoughts. But what happens, Bryson, with that, if you're correct, and if he plays well against Memphis and they win, he plays well against Tulane and they win, he plays well against Navy and they win. Like, what, are you going to stop playing him?
It's really hard. I think, honestly, the decision is going to be up to Mikey, because here's another factor that I wanted to bring up, is that this can really improve Mikey King's transfer portal stock. Because imagine
question. Yeah,
imagine what other schools would think if Mikey enters the transfer portal, as opposed to having a season where, sure, he may have his true freshman season to look at, but then he didn't play a whole season after that, versus now where he could have 4 games or perhaps more. I think really the question is going to be, if Mikey Keene continues to play and he continues to do well when he plays, then I think the question for Mikey Keene is going to be, do I want to sacrifice a year of eligibility if it means I can improve my stock in the transfer portal? Because the more I keep going and the more I can keep playing, another big program might be able to come to me and sign me. So that's only a question that he can answer, but it's a very intriguing idea. And right now we're focusing on winning this season. And so as far as Mikey Keene is concerned, I'm only worried about what he can do this season. And I think whatever Mikey's answer to that question is going to depend on if we see him again after his 4-game red shirt is up. And that's also going to depend on the recovery of John Rice Plumlee.
Yeah, I would agree with that. All right, we got Kyle Nash is jumping in here.
Yes, we just got Kyle. Kyle just arrived. Let's ahead and bring him on.
There we go. Kyle Nash.
How you doing?
Joining us.
What's going on, gentlemen? A fun one to say the least, but hey, I told everybody to bet the under. I'm just saying.
Amen to that. Well, you're smart on that. Let's get to you're right about that. And good Lord, that game deserved the under. Let me tell you, they earned that under. Good Lord, because that was tough to watch at times. All right, look, this is a simple show, Kyle. This is a simple show.
Oh, great. So you're going right to the obvious topic, and let me take you there. The offensive line had their best game of the year. That was the question you were going to ask, right, Elo?
They did play well. We did acknowledge that they won the line of scrimmage, but it also helps when you have a quarterback that makes quicker reads and, throws the forward pass pretty accurate to his receivers, which we saw.
Well, put it this way, though, because the offensive line improvements, I'll defend Kyle on this, is that the offensive line improvement from last season contributed to Mikey Keene being able to actually.
I think they complemented each other well, didn't they, Kyle? Because we've talked about how Mikey got rid of the ball. He helped them in that. I thought they complemented each other.
Well, right. And listen, when your running element isn't an essential part of the offense on the whole, there's less to concentrate on, right? There's not going to be a designed run necessarily as rampant as it would be with JRP. So the concentration and progression is a lot different. And I don't want the world to come out here and think I'm just this John Rice Plumlee defender. If you'll remember on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast, I thought Keene should start. But that all being said, I think Mikey did an excellent job. If anybody is surprised that he's calm, cool, and collected, apparently everybody forgot what he did as a freshman. Hello. But for my money,
some people are suggesting the coaching staff may have forgotten.
Well, what some people are also forgetting is how much better the offensive line has gotten from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And gentlemen, I would remind each and everybody else, every time the offensive line has played well, the quarterback has played well. And this game is no different. Eric, that touchdown for RJ Harvey that sealed the win eventually for UCF was literally the biggest hole I can remember this offensive line making all season.
No, they won the line of scrimmage. Now, what did Gus say afterwards? Because we've heard some scuttles about what did he say about Mikey Keene, his future. What did we say about JR? I know he said he had a concussion, so we know that JRP has a concussion. By the way, and I congratulated Gus is the first college football coach that's admitted that a kid has an injury. Congratulations in a postgame. let's God bless us all. But what did he say about Mikey Keene, about his performance and his future?
I mean, the words calm and cool was the continued thing. And I believe the words starter within his own right. is the best way to kind of assess what Gus described as his performance there. So with all that going on, I mean, that's really the takeaway. Gus is too smart and too veteran a coach to give you too much as far as the future. Let's be clear with all that. But for all the people during the game that thought Tommy Castellanos was going to come out, listen, if you didn't pay attention to Gus and me as well, who said he's not burning that red shirt because he's, because of the future aspect that Castellanos might represent for the program, you weren't paying attention. And Mikey Keene just proved why he's that guy right now. Because I'll put it this way. In the situation faced tonight with the conference championship on the line, that is not where you put in a rookie guy. Period, point blank, end of story.
Yeah. And I would argue your season was on the line. You lose this game, the season's going south. I mean, all your goals are pretty much out of reach.
I know you said as much on the podcast, so I want you to notice my black shirt I'm wearing tonight with black pants also that you can't see, and my black shoes. I wanted to make sure I was prepared to go into mourning for you if that happened, Derek.
Oh, I had my black. I got black on my. It was the funerals here. What was there anything addressed about, because there's been speculation about Mikey Keene that they trying to redshirt, so he's going to transfer. Was any of that brought up? Because I've heard mixed. I don't know if that was fans posting, or did Gus even say anything about Mikey and whether he's trying to redshirt him or not, or any of that was brought up?
No, not at all. And at this point, really, they can't know the extent of Plumlee's situation. Yeah, he had a concussion in this game, and yeah, he was held out for the rest of it. But evaluation is still a crazy thing. Depending on how things go, he may start next week, he may not. We don't know any of that yet.
I don't think he should start, period, if we're going to take concussions seriously. I mean, Kyle, you know how I feel about this. I'm still on edge over the NFL and the Dolphins and how they've been treated over concussions. Right. We can't be double standards here and pick on the NFL because everybody likes to pick on the NFL's the bad guy. To me, JRP, just for his own well-being, shouldn't play next week. I can't imagine you playing him next week. And I think Mikey King's earned the start for next week anyway.
Oh, yeah. And let's put it this way. And again, I don't want to play doctor. I'm with you. The chances that he won't start there will do exist. I'm not taking anything away from that, Eric. But where I want to kind of distance this situation from the Dolphins situation, which is relevant in all of football, I get you, buddy, is the fact that UCF and company, in what could possibly be, depending on how things shake out, the pivotal moment of the season, and they opted, or the pivotal game of the season, I should say, and opt to protect the player here. And that has to be accounted for 100%.
Oh, I agree. And look, and the fact that they've already acknowledged he has a concussion, they're not trying to hide it. So I think that's all positives, and again, I think that's the most important part there. All right, you've been. I know you want to talk about the line. What did you see on this line? You mentioned how they've improved, but somewhat I would say, where was this line last week in Greenville? I mean, this is a drastic difference from last week to this week. How do you explain the performance? Because you're right. I think this was their best performance of the year. Was it just the fact that, they got slapped in the face last week? And they, what do you make of this performance? Because they did outplay Cincinnati on both sides of the ball in the line of scrimmage. I thought, and really, if it wasn't for the turnovers, really, UCF probably should have won this by a bigger margin.
First of all, Coach Malzahn agrees with you wholeheartedly. The number of times he said on the podcast, I wish we wouldn't have turned the ball over. We could have had a few more touchdowns and, would have been a more dominant performance than it was, which is code for we could have beat the brakes off of this group. That's a championship group. And they were still in a situation where they didn't do everything right, and they still won the football game, right? What's the cliche you heard all those years with dominance in the NFL with the Patriots? Well, champions win these kind of games when the chips are down. Well, that's what you had here tonight. But to answer your question more directly, the difference in what the O-line can do in this game versus last week, the game wasn't they didn't spot Cincinnati any points. To open the first three drives, turnover. The fact it was only 17-0 at some point is actually a tribute to how good this defense is, for clarity, right? That's a situation where being only down 17 can be determined as being only down 17. By the end of that game in East Carolina there, Eric, the Pirates defense could pin their ears back. They knew they were throwing the ball. They were predictable. Throughout the game, it kept close. and thus balance was still possible on offense. You didn't know if Mikey was going to do his heroics and throw a big ball for a touchdown, or if that parting of the Red Sea would take place for RJ Harvey.
Well, I also would like to point out that the difference from last week is that Cincinnati was very quick to abandon the run game last time. And while Ben Bryant did get complete 25 passes and threw for almost 300 yards, there were still those drops that I thought really played a role in how they basically just kind of stopped Cincinnati's offense cold because they weren't going to the run game.
Right, but that's not Cincinnati's style either. I think that was Luke Fickell admitting that, yeah, our line's getting beat up here, Kyle, right? We just can't run on them.
Well, a little of both, but the openings are there. To Bryson's point, I feel like the Bearcats receivers didn't do themselves any favor.
No, they didn't. You're right. No, you're right about that. I think you're both right about that.
So
I mean, we saw it in the SMU game, right? Rasheed Rice was supposed to have the big game for Tanner Mordecai, and we had a lot of drops there too.
By the way, I want to give a shout out because this is the most favorite comment of the season on Night Shift here. I'm really happy to see this. Cossack Advisor, welcome back, buddy. We've missed you. He says teams now have game plan for both JRP and MK. I actually agree with that, but first of all, more importantly, hope you're doing better. Cossack has had some health issues he's been dealing with, so I'm happy to see him on the group chat here. So I wanted to acknowledge that first. And I want, Kyle, you to address what Cossack Advisor said. That's a valid point. We're going to celebrate Mikey King this week, right? But how much of this is the fact Cincinnati maybe didn't plan for Mikey King? Or now Memphis and Tulane will have tape on Mikey King and be able to possibly prepare for it?
Yeah, listen, and that's the one advantage you have when your starting quarterback goes down, right? What does this guy do? Well, I mean, listen, they have tape from last year, but they don't have the same team from last year, right? And I'll put it this way. There's a reason why Cincinnati just completely boondoggled UCF last year. They had 2 NFL caliber corners watching and hawking for a young Mikey King to throw an errant pass. You weren't getting errant passes here tonight. What amazing what an offseason will do, ladies and gentlemen, right? And then over and above that, I can't put it in the right words but to say this. Everybody on that offense got involved. And when everybody on the offense does it right, that's how you got the SMU win, and that's how they got the win tonight, even overcoming self-inflicted wounds.
Well, one of the things I think that helped them recover from that self-inflicted wound was the safety. And I bring that up to say, how has no one ever told me about the nickname the Hyphen Brothers? I don't know if that was something Robert Griffin III made up for the ESPN broadcast, but I like the sound of that.
I feel like RG3 and Mark Jones kind of came up with that. I don't know. Kyle, am I wrong? Unless you heard something. Have you ever heard that Hyphen Brothers used around you with the players? They're talking about, I think that was more of a RG3 deal.
Yeah, well, I'll put it this way. It's not anything that I've heard before, and to put it as nicely as I can, if I'm calling it cheesy, that should tell you how good it is or isn't.
Yeah. Well, I say that to bring up the defense because while Tremont Morris-Brash didn't get the scoop and score touchdown, Josh Seliscar, I was really impressed with the game that he had today, and he was the one that ended up getting that safety for the UCF defense. He was second in tackles for the team, right behind Jason Johnson, who's once again, even though we don't really hear his name brought up, he's leading the team in tackles right now. Can you go ahead and just talk about, because the defense once again really kept this team in the game until Mikey King was able to get that game-winning drive going.
I mean, the reason why it's tough for me to talk about it, Bryson, isn't because I'm an offensive player in heart and know life in the trenches first. It's because we've talked about this. This is UCF's team this year. Defense first, defense to keep their offense in the game and light the powder keg for the explosion. The only reason why you didn't get the explosion is 2 red zone turnovers. That's a 14-point swing by my count, because I'm assuming Colton Boomer is not going to miss the extra point. He's given me no reason to believe that he will. But if I'll say this, those top two guys being the tops in tackles showed they took the runaway and they had to put the ball in Ben Bryant's hands. And listen, even Coach Malzahn, as well as Drew and myself in the press box, if you have to give Bryant all the credit in the world for being resilient and taking the hits that he did. I mean, listen, when you have Seliscar tackling you in the end zone and you have Ricky Barber coming at you at full tilt like the juggernaut right out of the Marvel universe, those are tough hits to take.
I would agree. I would agree with that. Bryant, I think, because I was looking at the halftime stats, and one thing that really stood out to me was just how in the face
Right in the face.
When you look, I mean, looking here, UCF had 7 pass breakups on Bryant and 7 quarterback hurries. That is 14 throws that they interfered with. I think they really learned their lesson after playing Holton Ahlers last week, because they were not going to let Bryant throw all over us.
I'm not going to acknowledge lessons learned until we see this team play well outside of the state of Florida, right? All right. Let's kind of see, have they learned their lessons. I don't think the issues have been when they've been at home. It's been when they're away from the state of Florida. We'll see. They're going to learn that next week.
And let me cut in with this real quick too, Eric. I see the point you're trying to make, Bryson. The difference is Ben Bryant in no universe is averaging 300 yards a game at this point in his career. And I think to take that away from Ahlers, as much as Elo expected a turnover from him last week, I kid. But yeah, that's not the same caliber of quarterback. But hey, credit to that defense taking the stronger dimension away. I mean, listen, that's basic Bill Belichick ball. If you're trying to take away the top weapon and having them beat you another way, and they couldn't tonight.
I want to get some comments in here. Amy Bachman, great win, Knights. Love me some Mikey. He's the most popular guy on campus right now, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think there's any question about that. We got Roger Greenberg. We finally beat Cincinnati for the first time since 2018. That's a bounce-back dub. I agree. I think that's a significant win. I said it. This was their season to back on the line, but I think it was good to beat Cincinnati. You had to beat them at home. If you weren't going to beat them at home, man, who knows if you beat them later in the year, if you play them again at Nippert, probably not. You know, it changes the narrative a little bit. They needed this kind of win after, quite frankly, a bad taste in your mouth from the week prior against East Carolina. This was a huge win for the program long term, in my opinion, regardless of what happens the rest of this year.
Correct. That's a great take, Eric. And now let me add that to this. Not just this win, but this game was very much necessary for all the chips on the line. With this being the new rival in football, listen, say what you will, USF is in the rear view. I don't care how much Jeff Sharon says otherwise. This is going to be the new rivalry in the year. Some other fools tried to make it Memphis at one point. Sorry, world. But it's definitely Cincinnati moving forward. That's clear going into the Big 12.
I also think it's a game for Mikey Keene, too, because after the performance that Mikey Keene had against Cincinnati, I bet it was pretty cathartic for him to be able to step in and really, really execute well, going 15 for 21 with 176 yards on.
Yeah, let me just piggyback. Jim John piggyback on what Jim John here just posted. Mikey makes quicker reads and gets the ball out of his hand quicker than JRP. Your reaction to that, Kyle? Is Jim right?
Sort of. He makes quicker reads, but his ball travels slower, so it kind of all balances out. And again, it's a lot easier to make quicker reads when part of what you're asked to do isn't to check for a run option as well. And let's call it what it is on a couple other fronts too. I feel like the defense UCF was facing at that time of the game was sitting back more than earlier. I think they might have respected Mikey Keene and were more worried about the big ball attempt down the field. So those underneaths and comeback routes that you saw Mikey hit were there. It's not like Plumlee had a bad game throwing the ball. Let's be clear. I just feel like there was a difference. There's too much different for me to say anything about this guy can do it better than this guy at this point. There is not enough tape on Mikey Keene at this time, nor has he been asked at any point in the season to come back from a 17-point deficit.
We got one more. Matt J. Backups quarterbacks is the fan favorite unless they lose. Mikey leads the team against a tough Cincy defense. I'm not saying who should start, but he deserves a clap.
Amen.
Kyle, his legacy at UCF is cemented no matter what happens here. I mean, it's a unique career, right? Even who knows what happens the rest of his career. Maybe he moves on after this year or whatever. But no matter what happens, he's going to have on his resume 2 significant wins in UCF football. The bowl game against Florida, and this one against Cincinnati, a top 25 game in dramatic fashion off the bench. Probably the biggest win a backup quarterback has had coming in a game that I can remember in recent memory. I mean, maybe Brett Hodges when he came in for Calabrese a bunch of times in 2009, but I don't think any of those comeback wins that Brett Hodges led off the bench compare to this.
Yeah, and I mean, the only thing I would offer that might compare is DJ Mack in the conference championship. But in that game, he started that game after Milton was hurt. Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah. He wasn't pushed into the game on his own 3. So there is definitely something to be said for that, no question.
So, yeah, I'm going to be interested to see. Let's see. What else we got? We got Garrett. What do you think about that? There's a quarterback that's a veteran, has come in right away and actually threw the ball like a rock. Rock, it's a strong word. But I do think this. Mikey being a veteran, right? To your point you mentioned earlier, Kyle, a young quarterback, maybe like Thomas or whatever, doesn't handle that situation like Mikey did, right? That's
not at all. Yeah, he's been cool and calm ever since that first game at Navy. Sure, mistakes might have been made when he was a youth, as it were, starting at the quarterback position last year, but he never really seemed rattled by it. He was always able to face the next man up, always very smooth, still on the mic afterwards, and all of that, and everything that you expect a team leader to be. As a matter of fact, I think Mikey put it best tonight when he was asked about, last year and how cool he was and how collected he seemed to be. That's the job of a quarterback as item number 1, you would think, if you're taking the field, right? At least Mikey Keene thinks so.
And he's got these intangibles, man. I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if you've seen the social media, the celebration in the locker room. Those players they love that kid, right? Like, and there's something to be said for that. You've played. There's something to be said. Not that they don't like JRP, but they, especially the returner, they have a bond there with Mikey because Mikey played last year in an adverse situation. There's something there, man, that you can't put on a box score, on a stat line. I'm just saying, there's something there that these guys seem to respond to him a little bit.
Yeah, it's only something you could feel. You can't really enunciate it. And yeah, when you've been in it and through it together, you have a link that you don't describe. Like, listen, I still talk to my quarterback, and we're well past playing. But when I see him and I shake his hand, it's kind of like, when I look him in the eye, there's always a remember that time look. You know what I mean? And that's that same thing.
Jeff Wiseman, Mikey effing legend.
You mentioned the intangibles, Eric, and Garrett Weiss made this point. He was making the defense jump off sides and make them jumpy multiple times. Now, I don't know how much of that is Mikey.
Yeah, that feels more Cincinnati than Mikey. I mean, Cincinnati, we talked about this, Kyle, in the podcast. We all did. The undisciplined Cincinnati. Again, that finally caught them. It finally bit them because they were a little undisciplined at times with some of the offsides, the penalties. It kind of caught up with them. This has been them all year long, and it finally bit them a little bit today.
With all that in mind, let me flip that on its head and take it over to UCF side, right? Earlier on, there were concerns about penalties for the Knights and all that was going on, and Coach Malzahn took it personally on his shoulder and said, I will get better. He put it on him, and as the season has gone on, he put that on him. Well, if you're a UCF fan, something else you would have liked to have heard tonight in the press conference, he puts East Carolina on his back that they weren't ready for that out of state, that other hostile environment, all of that other stuff. He's put that on himself, and he has vowed that that's not going to happen again. And to your point, Eric, he needs to come through on that if the Knights are to be conference champions.
We'll start with an airplane, that flight. Whatever you've been doing on flights, change it because it hasn't been working.
Right.
When you get on that
the
plane.
Music, anything.
I'm saying. Matt J says, earlier this year, I say Mikey wasn't a viable quarterback option due to the O-line, but he was getting it out so quickly tonight. I think I was wrong, Matt J, with the comment there on that one.
See, that's the thing. When the line's together and the quarterback looks smooth and he's not being chased, you can't, unless you know to look, you can't tell. And it's that simple, especially when you have a guy on one side who's 6'10". Swoboda having to come low to meet his guy and still have a throw over his shoulder without it getting knocked against his back is a factor. That's a thing. Again, this whole Mikey getting the ball out quick thing, am I the only one that sees a little bit of the rainbowness in some of the throws? The one thing I'll say about JRP's throw that is better is it's got a lot more pop when it comes out. I'm not here to say that Mikey throws only slow, but there is definitely a difference in velocity. But to Mikey's credit, overall, he's more accurate, and that's what I think you're reacting to tonight.
Well, Mike Doty also brings up the O-line, and he says JRP is the better quarterback when the O-line isn't on form. When the O-line is on form, Mikey would be better because he can run just enough. So here's an idea that I think would be very interesting is we're talking about if Mikey plays next week, we should watch how he performs over the next couple of games or however long, depending on if JRP is out. I think the bigger question may be, let's watch the offensive line and see if they can sustain the good performance that they had in this game. Because if, say, the offensive line stays consistently good like it did tonight throughout these next few games, then I would say go with Mikey Keene, because I think one of the reasons that Malzahn went with Plumlee is because he was worried about the offensive line, and they sure didn't really start the season exactly very good. And last season proved that Mikey Keene was kind of just had to scramble all over the place because of the O-line. So I would say watch the O-line, and the O-line might end up being a determining factor in if Mikey Keene has the job going forward or if JRP is brought back in upon recovery.
I know I'm just a student of the game, but I have never been happier to see a response from a Padawan in my life. By the way, I'd like to admit Mike Doty is my burner account. No, I'm kidding. That's exactly what I feel like I've been preaching all year. And Mike, I agree with you wholeheartedly, 100%.
But Kyle, the only thing I would say is I still think Keene maybe makes a difference in that Louisville game. I think he makes that one of those completions they needed to win that game. They had ample chances there, even as much as the line struggled in that game. There was throws there that were missed. Now, some of that was play calling. Some of that, who knows? We'll never know. It doesn't matter. It's just done.
Right. I don't I feel like regardless of the quarterback, I think if that game were later in the year versus the week that it was, I think that's different. And that's what happens. That's what happens with bringing in two transfers on the tackles and then sliding a tackle into guard. You have two mainstays at their same spot. You're developing 60% of the line. That's what's going to happen. And listen, I know that JRP has missed throws, but the games where he's successful, what was it, 20-29, I think, against SMU? And he had another good performance that I can't remember off the bat. That was a high percentage as well.
Right.
Yeah, the Temple game, which, I know you may not want to count that, Eric, but again, high performance or a high efficiency in a game where the O-line was actually able to dominate.
And Eric, you bring up the Louisville game. I just want to say really quickly that I think the Louisville game, at least as far as UCF's resume, might look a little bit like not as bad now, because Louisville absolutely walloped number 10 Wake Forest today, 48-21.
Doesn't make you feel better about losing. I don't think.
Let's remember.
Yeah.
Like, look, I just want to
remember the ACC, guys. The ACC.
There you go, Kyle. See, why did you set up Kyle? You just set him up to just take another shot at the Atlantic Coast Conference. By the way,
I could have been cheap, Eric, and gone after Jeff Syracuse Orange and what they did against Notre Dame today.
You should. That's yeah, we could play that game too, because Florida State scored 1,000 points and dominated Georgia Tech better than UCF did. So we can play that game. Every week's different. It is what it is.
Matt J just said, great win tonight, but still nervous for future road games.
Yeah, you should. No, I agree. I agree, because, again, as great as this win is for this year, it doesn't matter if you lose next week. Doesn't matter. Like, that's the problem. And I am curious. We talk about all the positives Mikey Keene does. Memphis will likely have a week to prepare for Mikey Keene. I'm kind of curious what kind of defensive schemes they'll come. Memphis and potentially Tulane, who right now, if you're no two people are more happier than the folks in Tulane and Mike Oresco, because right now, Mike Oresco in the league, it's in Tulane's hands. The championship might stay home. It may not go to a team that's leaving. And trust me, that's a big, big motivation, I think, for Mike Oresco, the league, and Tulane. They are big Tulane people down the stretch here. So I think I'm really curious to see how teams adjust with Mikey Keene, if Keene. And again, I would be stunned. I would be floored if Mikey Keene wasn't under center at quarterback next week at Memphis. But I agree. And how do they kind of, this is such an emotional win. Do you have a hangover? I agree. The Memphis game, and I said it from the beginning of the year, that was a dangerous game. And it still is. Yeah,
absolutely. And let me tag on to this point. How much that front office for the conference is going to be paying attention in the coming weeks for Tulane, right? We talked about their schedule on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast and the gauntlet they're about to go to, featuring two Big 12 transient teams also in not only UCF, but Cincinnati still on there as well. So, hey, listen, I know he's going to act impartial as he should, but we all know deep down Mr. Oresco is going to be wearing some green wave attire in his heart.
Well, it'd be huge. It'd be huge. By the way, College Game Day at Tulane got a boost today with UCF winning and Tulane still, playing well. That Ole Miss is losing as we're talking right now to A&M, so that could help the case for College Game Day at Tulane. So UCF might be involved in a College Game Day after all.
You're just setting yourself up for heartbreak again, Eric. You haven't learned your lesson.
No, I have not. No, I haven't. And I'm never going to let that go.
Well,
I don't think Lee Corso. I think that's why Lee Corso had bad health. I think he was devastated. He was at home game for him this week.
He was suffering from a broken heart. Go ahead, Bryson.
Well, I don't think that that Tulane's green is the only color that Mike Oresco is going to fly, because Fallen Hero, the base legend, poses this: do we want ECU to beat Cincy or lose to Cincy? And I think what this kind of goes is that Garrett Weiss kind of elaborates on this, is best Cincinnati. I want to see ECU win out and we get a chance at them. I have the American Conference standings right here, and just do a quick little refresh just to make sure it's all up to date in case another game ended. So right now, UCF is number 2. Right now they're in the American Athletic Conference Championship game against Tulane, because UCF has the tiebreak over Cincy. East Carolina is at 3 losses right now, which means that if Cincinnati loses another time, then that would bring them out of consideration. And say something happens with Tulane, say UCF beats them, and they have another conference loss down the road. East Carolina,
we're getting way again.
The point is that
beat Memphis. I'm going to repeat this. If you don't beat Memphis, none of that matters. We can't worry about what everybody else is doing. You got to worry about yourself and not worry about who you'd rather play. Not just beat Memphis, please. I just want this team to prove to me, A, that they can play 2 weeks in a row, and B, they can play outside of the zip code of the state of Florida. Am I asking for too much, Kyle? Am I asking for too much?
Well, I'll say this, and I get where the fanhood might be coming from. They want the opportunity for UCF's longest standing series to go to a tie and head off into the sunset without a losing record, and all that is quite adorable. And if you're looking for that, yes, you want ECU to win. But I'm with Eric on this one. Take the ageless advice of Al Davis, former owner of the Raiders. May he rest in peace, and just win, baby.
Yeah, this team hasn't proven. I can't trust this team on a week-to-week basis. If this was 2017-18, we'd be having a completely different conversation. But this team hasn't proven that you could trust them on a weekly basis. Not yet. I'm sorry. That's just how I feel, and I think it's just I don't want to get caught again with looking ahead about, we want this team to just beat Memphis, start there, and let's just win a road game outside of Florida so I can feel good about or playing well outside of Florida. Let's start small steps here.
So Eric has learned his lesson. He's not going to let his heart get broken on this front, I appreciate.
That is why I'm still. You could tell my heart and my anger is still in my voice. I may never get over. And I've been to college. I feel bad for people like you, Kyle. You've never been to a college game day, have you?
Actually, I was in 2018. Sir.
Okay,
I was just with a different outlet.
I feel for Noah and Drew. They have not been to game day. They did not get.
Drew could have made it. But I digress. Listen, all I'll say is this. Speaking of Drew, you set the table nicely with some concepts that I think he's going to hit in the knee-jerk reaction tonight on the blackandgoldbanneret.com.
Did I? Okay, good.
Another comment that I wanted to get to. Eric Edwards said this on Twitter, tagging you, me, and myself, Eric. And
hey, Eric, how you feel about Tiffany Roberts-Sahadak right now, huh? Coach of the year, probably. I haven't heard a word all year, buddy, from you.
Eric, not yet. Wrong sport, wrong football. Is next year's QB room a complete mystery that we have to wait and see how things go the next 4 games? How thankful is Gus that he didn't have to bench JRP to see MK does this hand was forced by the head injury. I mean, I think Malzahn knew what he had his hands on with Mikey Keene, and that's why if there was some kind of, communication between them about Mikey Keene wanting to go in the portal, that's why he wanted to have him, because if JRP was injured like he was today, then either A, he may have to burn Thomas Castellanos' red shirt, or B, he didn't have Timmy McClain back then. So that means that the quarterback room would basically be really, really thin right now. So I think he is quite thankful to have Mikey Keene there for this sort of emergency. But as far as next year's quarterback room goes, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a complete mystery. I think that that we can make some informed assumptions on some things based on some words that we heard. Malzahn mentioning that he wants to preserve Mikey's red shirt kind of gives an indication that if Mikey wants to transfer,
no, I don't think he said that. He didn't say that.
No, yeah, he wasn't talking about Mikey's red shirt. He said up front that Thomas Castellanos' red shirt was what he was going to protect.
Okay, it was Castellanos.
Let's get that straight out.
I didn't hear Castellanos' name, so I thought they were talking about Mikey.
No.
So, okay.
Yeah, and let me take you back a little bit. Yeah. When he came in, Castellanos, late in the Temple game, the following Monday, Jason Beatty of the Sentinel asked him specifically about that redshirt situation, and Gus's answer was that Mikey Keene is our backup quarterback, and he backed up his own words tonight, to say the least. But to kind of answer the question, I think you did it best already, Bryson. Completely different? No. It's one of the top two starters, might be different. Castellanos will still be in the room, and honestly, if we start getting below who that third quarterback is, does it really matter if they're different or not? I mean, at that point, I'm not really sure how much you're wanting to worry about that. But at this point, yeah, I think it's, the top two guys might be in some contention. I think that has to do with a lot of things, though. Well, one thing in particular, I think will determine that. If JRP decides to put all his chips into the table for baseball, whether he decides himself or is asked to, for whatever reason, with what happens throughout the year, that will determine what will happen.
Caustic Advisor, by the way, he said he gave us a update on. He said he gets out of rehab next week.
Awesome.
So
that's the best news. That's good.
He also said that RJ Harvey's game's MVP. Look, gentlemen, with all the talk that we've been having about the quarterback conversation, we really haven't given enough credence to this game that I said on Twitter. If you had to pick one game this season that is the breakout game for RJ Harvey, it is this one. 18 rushing attempts, 84 yards, 2 touchdowns, including the game winner, and a 25-yard catch. I mean, they really let RJ Harvey run wild, and it seems that he kind of switched roles in a sense, where he now is the premier running back that is the speedster and playmaker that I said that Johnny Richardson was last season.
Listen, backfield pass blocks don't make the stat sheet. So the fact that continues to get disrespected isn't a surprise to me. I'm not saying Harvey had a bad game. I'm not saying he wasn't an essential element. But I don't care which running back was in the game for that parting of the Red Sea at the end, for that final touchdown. That person was going to score. Whether it was by a sweet spin move by RJ Harvey.
Were you going to score, Kyle? Would you have scored?
I could not have gotten through that last defender, I don't think. But because he would have gone for my legs and the game's over. But with Bowser, I think he would have run through him. I think, Harvey making the move he did, both of those guys, if you're to believe Coach Malzahn, are professional level guys, NFL level guys, from his mouth to my ears to your listening pleasure here tonight. I'm taking nothing from RJ Harvey. The offensive line and what they did as a unit should get that MVP trophy, but they won't because they don't reward fat guys. I'll put it this way. You could make a worse choice for MVP than RJ Harvey tonight.
Well, there's also the point, I mean, even with limited carries, like more on the rushing, Johnny Richardson still got 32 yards on just 5 carries, and Ryan O'Keefe doing well. Like, one thing I think I said last week was that they didn't give the ball enough to Ryan O'Keefe, and because when these playmakers like RJ Harvey and Ryan O'Keefe get the ball, just better stuff happens. I mean, at the first quarter, I made a tweet that said, like, RJ Harvey and Ryan O'Keefe had accounted for 58% of the Knights' total yards at that point. We saw
a lot of jet sweeps, Kyle. A lot of jet sweeps to get O'Keefe the ball.
We did see a lot of that. But at one point in the game, and actually, according to the stats there, it's still the longest one. The big carry that RJ Harvey had was for 26 yards. You take that out, he wasn't as averaging as much as Bowser without those big home run carries. But one could argue That's why you put in an RJ Harvey. You want that lottery ticket aspect.
Right.
It made it a career for Adrian Peterson for the Vikings back when, right? So I see it. It's all philosophical. It's all in the opponent you're playing. And when you're in a situation where the opponent's going to sit back and dare you to kind of be in a situation to create a turnover against who they think is a quarterback that might make a mistake, sure, I'll take that favorable situation and leave my speed guy in because I don't need to protect as much. And it paid off.
Eric Edwards pointing out, fitting the winning score was by the guy with the pink breast cancer mouth guard in October. That is quite fitting indeed, Eric.
Hey, Eric, listen, I got mine. I'm just saying. It's not a mouth guard, but this is my equipment.
This is Night Shift right here on the Black and Gold Banneret. Eric Lopez, Mr. Bryson Turner, Kyle Nash with the tie and the suit. I feel like UCF plays better when you wear the black suit with the pink tie. Maybe you're the reason they won.
Stranger things have been attributed to me, but listen, the black shirt is your fault, man. I like I said, you warned me to mourn for the season, and I wanted to be ready.
Can you imagine? Wow, that would have been crazy there. That was a wild finish there. Mark Soskin, concerned about the 6 turnovers in 2 games. Fortunate in that regard. Are you concerned about them the last 2 weeks, the turnovers there? Or is that just random? We've debated how much of this is fluky, how much of this, what do you make of the turnovers?
I mean, you're always concerned about turnovers. That's football, and I don't mean to make light of the question, but listen, the turnovers being obviously double the turnovers in ECU, right? But the difference is most of them were loaded up front. That last turnover, I honestly barely even count because that's the end of the game. You're trying to force a play. The offense is deflated. The offensive line is getting beat because the offense has to be one-dimensional and predictable, yada, 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 yada. I can make an argument that the first 3 turnovers to open the game on offense, to not really have any sort of positive drive per se, that doesn't end in disaster until the second quarter. You can't spot a veteran like Holton Ahlers that much stuff. I can't say this enough. So turnovers are always concerning, but when you're turning the ball over against a team that can cash in, that's even more dangerous. Cincinnati was not that tonight. There you go.
This is an interesting question that I think well 41 points out. Honest question, does tonight's performance split the locker room, especially if JRP somehow starts next week or the following one? Eric, you've mentioned before how you highlighted how the team really lifted up Mikey Keene in the locker room after the game. So
I've never seen that. I don't recall a UCF player. That's one of the top highlights where a player got showcased like that. I don't know, Bryson, if you can find it, we could show it. It was a heck of a celebration for that kid. He's not whatever. Like I said, Mikey's gonna remember that moment in his life. That's gonna be a pretty cool moment.
Yeah, I think Josh Staliskar kind of mentioned it best too. Is the closest thing they could remember to something like that taking place in a game was the Gasparilla Bowl. That was evoked. And that fact from the players on the field, they heard tonight's crowd, in at least the mind of Josh Staliskar, as being even louder than the Gasparilla Bowl. Now, if I go and take a decimeter or whatever you want to call it, something that measures the decibels in the stadium, you may not lock right down onto it, and that's scientifically true. But what they felt, that was the case.
Yeah, the atmosphere is good. Here's the clip of the team in the locker room there celebrating the players celebrating Mikey King. That's a pretty cool moment, Kyle. They don't just do that for anybody.
Right, you got to earn it. And listen, if Mikey King, of all people in that locker room right now, hasn't earned it in that way, there's some of last year in that cheer. Let me be clear. Rookie, freshman, Mikey King doesn't get that on a season one like this. That's carried in here.
Well, here's my thing. I do agree that last year's Mikey King wouldn't get this, but I want to bring up the point that because would it split the locker room? I don't think so. And this is why, because I've talked with Greg Lovelady before. JRP's a baseball player. And one thing that Greg Lovelady told me, I actually asked him, hey, how is the bond with JRP and the team? Because, he's going to be gone for long stretches of time doing football stuff. And he told me, he said, when Plumlee first came here, he was instant bond. with the group. It took him maybe a couple days to do. The point I'm making is that Plumlee is a very likable player. I think that he also is someone that can really craft relationships and is a very likable guy. Both Mikey and Plumlee are. And so, do I think this splits the locker room? I don't think so. I think that there maybe people will have their opinions, and then it's going to depend on if those opinions like take over like what they say, essentially, in a sense. But I think that these players will probably be happy with either one, because both players are extremely likable people, and so I don't think it matters which one starts. The locker room will be behind either one.
Right. I mean, so long as the Dubs are there, everything's going to be fine. I think, Bryson.
Right? Produce wins. That's the key.
Yeah, exactly. And who feels what way about what in the locker room? Honestly, unless these guys or are talking to them, we don't know that either. We're guessing, right? I think there's an element having played, my own experiences. We've had guys that have tried to come in and had to do something because the quarterback was hurt. We had another guy that had to start, and honestly, for that night, at the very least, anything positive channels through that guy, period, point blank, end of story. I mean, I don't want to name drop too much about, the team I played for at one point had Kyle Israel at quarterback. He wasn't able to play in the championship game, and there was somebody else who came in the final game, and they loved that guy just as much after they still won the championship without Kyle Israel. I'm just saying.
Wow. Damn, deep thought Kyle Israel mentioned there. I like that. Let's wrap this up, Kyle, because you've got a Jaguar game to cover in a few hours. So literally a few hours.
Don't listen. Don't mislead the crowd, Eric. They're in London. I'm going to be at Edition Financial Arena come 2:00 for the women's game against St. Leo. So there's that.
Wow. And then the coordinators might actually, show up and do a media appearance. They'll actually probably take place. Who knows?
Yeah, I could walk across the way. That would be good. But let's not dive too much into that drama. Don't get me in trouble, sir.
Let's give me your final thoughts here from this game now and moving forward to Memphis, because there's going to be so much chatter this week about the quarterback situation. It's going to be wild. You and Drew are going to have so much stuff to write about, to argue about, to discuss on the podcast, on the site, over the quarterback situation. Just give me your overall thoughts here with this win and now moving forward in Memphis.
Listen, everybody's going to talk about the quarterbacks, as you said, Eric, because they're the team captains. They're the guys that handle the ball every snap of any offense. Facts of the case of those, and they're not in dispute. But unless we know more, or until we know more about John Rice's health, that's another question. Going into the upcoming game, Memphis will obviously be tough, no question. I think that's another 3:30 kick Eastern time, 2:30 in Memphis if you're in the Central. But with all that in mind, I think it's dangerous to kind of speculate in either direction until we know more who the starter is. In the meantime, celebrate the offensive line and hope that they can maintain that performance and that UCF's offense continues to catch the football, eliminates basic turnovers with Mikey King getting reps with the first teamers, because one has to assume at least tomorrow that's going to happen with the concussion situation. And in all that in mind, guys, I think the focus needs to be on this offense doing anything they can to keep the offense balanced.
That's Kyle Nash, ladies and gentlemen, doing his work. He's still got work. He's got post-game press conference to post. It'll be on the YouTube channel. He mentioned he's going to be at women's basketball exhibition game. I mean, the man's a maniac. You should just rent property in the building there.
We have had the conversation that while in mileage-wise it may not be as far, number of days spent in a location, Edition is pretty high up there. Let's call that what it is.
Very good. All right, Kyle. Great work as always. Always good to chat. We'll chat later this week, I'm sure, on the pod. And let the quarterback debate begin or continue. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your day.
Honor, joy, and privilege, guys. But until the next one, class dismissed.
That is Kyle Nash joining us here on the Banneret podcast. A couple thoughts here before we quick thoughts here. RG3 from well 41. RG3 gave UCF some of the greatest promotion anyone ever has individually. Yeah, no, he's good. He did a fun. Lewis Riddick did a good job too a couple of weeks ago on Thursday night. Then obviously RG3. You were there, Bryson, with RG3 at the Spirit Splash.
Yes, I was. It was a really cool experience. I actually never got a chance to see him actually because I was a little further back. RG3 was able to muscle his way kind of to the front. I knew I really wasn't going to be able to do that. So, but going there was an absolutely amazing experience. It's the first time I ever went. I was my freshman year. I was just busy and I didn't end up going. And then COVID, for the other seasons. But I knew I wanted to go to this one, and it was really cool to get the chance to go in there and be a part of it. Mackenzie Milton was actually the MC there and got to introduce Gus Malzahn, Johnny Dawkins, Satia Messer, and the other dignitaries that were there. And we all got to sing happy birthday to Gus Malzahn. So that was a nice experience. And of course, I got this duck, which was a really nice little wrap to the day. These things, by the way, I know that RG3 mentioned this in the broadcast that people like really want these ducks and that they're online selling these things, but to really put it in perspective, in the scrum for it, everyone's going for ducks like this. There are people that had some scraped knees and things like that. Like, people really want these things. For me to get this one, I literally had to go down into the water. It's not deep water, by the way. It's very shallow, but I had to go into the water and cut the duck like this. And there were still people that were trying to wedge it out of my hands until I screamed, "I got it, I got it, I got it." The point is, though, one of the best homecoming traditions in the country, and I'm glad that RG3 got to be a part of it. And by the way, when Mark Jones and RG3 were talking about it, Mark Jones said that if he and RG3 come back to UCF for homecoming, Mark Jones will be a part of the Spirit Splash.
There you go. All right, very good. All right, let's wrap it up here. A couple quick notes of note. Take care. Softball was honored at the game. They for their great season last year, Bryson. That was cool to see. In fact, UCF softball Twitter just posted the video of them being honored there in the third quarter. I didn't get a chance to ask Kyle that, but that was a cool moment for them. They got the rings today. For me, that's number 4, by the way. I got a 4th ring. Thank you very much. Awesome though to get. I'm glad that I always enjoy the parts where these teams get celebrated at the football games. Dante Culpepper was in the building as well. But so that was fun homecoming game, certainly a memorable one. But yeah, I was really happy to see softball get honored there. They had a fall ball Friday night beating Stetson. I know baseball, you were at baseball. They draw with Jacksonville? They play 12 innings?
Yes, they played 12 innings and they ended up getting a draw thanks to a game tying RBI from true freshman Drew Farrow. I got a chance to talk to Drew after the game. I also got a chance to talk to true freshman outfielder Brady Shannon, who got a no doubter of a homer over the left field fence. Last night, the fall ball game was a lot more about getting a lot of new people in there and playing somebody else, which Greg Lovely talked about after the game.
Right.
So I'm not distressed at all by the fact.
Yeah, I don't. Results are kind of like meaningless. It's like preseason football. It doesn't matter. Softball beat Stetson, but again, you're right. You got to get as many players in. You want to try some different things out. So that's kind of my takeaway. Softball did beat Stetson. Sarah Willis is a name to keep in mind, pitching and right fielder. Could be a very important player for this team this year in their success in the circle. I know everybody keeps asking me whether I'm at volleyball, whether every time I'm on campus, I'm at the grocery store. How's the pitching? Well, I'm telling you, they've got arms. So we'll get into that more down the road when we have more time on that situation. Women's soccer will be hosting the conference championship tournament starting this Thursday. Now, there's going to be opening round games this weekend. UCF will play Thursday night, 7 o'clock. And no, Eric Edwards, I don't care what happens the rest of the way. Okay, Eric, understand this. And you can ask our friend Trace Trucco, and he will give you the same answer. Tiffany Roberts-Sahadak is not on the hot seat. The seat is cold. In fact, it's so cold, I would have to wear a sweater. She's won a 4th conference title. She's probably going to win Coach of the Year. She's going to be this coach for the Big 12. And guess what? They've outperformed the men's soccer team this year. They're ranked in the top 25. They've had a great year, and you know that, Bryson, having covered them pretty much every step of the way.
Indeed, they have. I was absolutely just touched when, with the embrace of Kristen Scott, Matilde Cack, Caroline Delisle, and Katie Bradley. I mean, the moment they won the regular season title was just amazing, and then getting them to undefeated. They basically went undefeated after Kristen Scott returned from injury, which really shows how important that win was for her. And I think this is just such a rebound team from last season, who had a shocking exit in the first round of the AAC tournament after losing their final regular season game against Cincinnati. So to see them turn it around in conference play like this and go in as the number 1 seed in the conference tournament is really nice to see. And I can't wait to see how they perform in the conference tournament. I just wish the men were doing good as well, because those two teams never seem to have good seasons at the same time.
Very rarely. Women's soccer, by the way, I think if they need to win the conference tournament, maybe host a first round game. Otherwise, they may be on the road first round game, but I think they're in. I think they're in the tournament. Men's soccer, as you mentioned, lost to Tulsa. Well, the good news is that's their last trip to Tulsa. 1-0 the final. What was it? Men's was playing undermanned, whatever. They lost to a really good Tulsa team. So now, Bryson, explain the scenario is they need to beat South Florida, Wednesday night, and need help, correct? To get into the conference tournament?
Yes, they do. Basically, what they need is UCF must win against USF, and then FAU must lose to FIU on that same night. Whatever happens with Charlotte is out of the question now, because if UCF wins, then that automatically takes Charlotte out of the AAC tournament. That takes them out. So as long as UCF wins and FAU loses, then UCF gets in. Anything else happens, if UCF loses, we're done. If FAU beats FIU for some reason, they're done. And FAU beat SMU this week, who was leading the conference coming in to yesterday's action. So I'm just going to suspend all of my assumptions on this conference, because anything can happen here. So I'll be watching on Wednesday, but the other thing to think about is if UCF gets into that conference tournament, it's a completely open tournament, and that I think renews UCF's chances of winning the tournament and having a shot of getting into the NCAA tournament.
They have to win the they have to get into the conference tournament. They have to win the tournament to get into the NCAAs. I think that's
definitely
there. And then volleyball beat Tulsa in 4 sets. They're at Wichita State on Sunday, depending when you're listening or watching this. And then they'll be back home to face SMU and facing Memphis next weekend. So it's going to be a busy weekend next weekend with volleyball and soccer. They are still 1 back of Houston. We're about 3 weeks away from Black Friday. Houston, UCF could be a collision for the conference championship. There could be one of the most anticipated matches in the history of the venue for volleyball there. So that's the story with volleyball and the Olympic sports there. We'll have more on this throughout the week. Bryce is going to have his nightcap later this week on blackandgobanneret.com. Where else are you? And you're going to be there Wednesday for the men's game, right? You're going to be there for the conference tournament.
Yes, indeed. That is the plan. Obviously, UCF student work, got to make sure I handle that. But I do want to be out there for these games, because I love covering postseason action, and to get the shot to cover an AAC tournament is amazing. So I'm excited to do that. I also have a Kristen Scott feature that I have long been working on. So I will be working on getting that up before the conference tournament starts. And as you mentioned, nightcap, I'll have nightcap as well. So I'm very excited as the fall begins to get to the later stages. I'm excited to see how these teams separate themselves.
Should be fun. All right, Bryson, let's wrap up the show. Go ahead and wrap it up for everybody. It's been fun.
It has indeed, Eric. Thank you all so much for spending your night with us. We appreciate you sticking around and coming on a little bit late after the game, so that way Eric and Kyle could get themselves on sooner. So I really appreciate you guys waiting a little bit. It was a really great game. I'm glad that we pulled out the win, and now we can be able to sit back and just get ready for another big one next week against Memphis at the Liberty Bowl, which no matter who is the opponent there, it's always going to be a tough one, and another big test to see if this team can win outside the state of Florida. Until then, my name's Bryson Turner. With me and for Eric Lopez, thank you so much for watching and being with us tonight. Happy homecoming. Go Knights. Charge on.